Tomorrow, that as states of emergency are declared in Maryland, the district, and here in Virginia.
There may be people that actually might suggest there is moral equivalency here of some kind. There is none. This is an attack upon the homeland of the United States and upon my state, and I'm angry about it.
Now, Gilmore also has a personal source for his anger. We've been told by Gilmore that he had a friend on board the flight that crashed here, political analyst Barbara Olson, believed to be among the dead on that flight. Joining me live here is my colleague Kevin Schultz, who had an opportunity to follow one of the local rescue crews that actually went inside the building.
That's right, Daryl. We were one of the few TV crews that were allowed on the grounds of the Pentagon for a close-up look at the rescue mission. We were invited along by the Montgomery County Urban Search and Rescue Team. This was the same team that went out to the Oklahoma City bombing. This time, though, their mission was in their own backyard.
System that's in place on this incident. Remember that this is a dangerous environment. I'm not sure.
1:30 p.m. Members of the Montgomery County Urban Search and Rescue Team gather at their headquarters in Rockville, Maryland to receive their mission.
So plan on not being able to communicate home for 10 days.
2:30 p.m. Bob Sessions and his rescue dog Sky board a bus with dozens others bound for the Pentagon.
Well, I have to look upon this as a combat zone. It has much of the feel of a combat zone. We are working against an enemy. We don't know if the enemy will take secondary action or not.
3:30 p.m. They arrive.
Something else. Got a lot of work to do in there, sir.
Just looking at the way the structure of the building here, the way it's collapsed down on a lean-to.
Got a lean-to collapse.
Looking for entry points.
Set up a makeshift fort in a tent city and are ordered into the crumpled mass of concrete.
Good luck, guys, all right? Be careful in there. All right?
We have safety people to cover us, to look out for the structure of the building. We focus on our job. Sky and I will hopefully find some live people.
Just before 8 p.m., they return.
You can see from the outside what it looks like, and it's worse on the inside.
What about Sky? How'd you do?
Sky did a great job in the areas that we could search, yes. In the areas that she could search, but in the totally charred areas, first of all, there's no chance of finding anybody alive in there. So there's no reason to really jeopardize her, and there are hot spots.
And you are looking at a live picture of the Pentagon tonight. The Montgomery County Search and Rescue Team is joined by rescue teams from Virginia Beach, Nashville, Tennessee, and Fairfax County. They are working closely with FEMA and the FBI. They are scheduled to be here for 10 days straight at least. There are quite a lot of scenes here today, but there was one that stuck out in my mind. We were allowed to walk through the field of evidence set up by the FBI, and there were pieces of plane laid out there, and there was not one piece that was longer than 2 feet. Reporting live from the Pentagon, I'm Kevin Schultz, ABC 7 News. Back to you.
Kevin, very powerful stuff seeing that rescue team in action. Thank you very much. Maureen?
Of course, the Pentagon is more than just a building. It's a powerful symbol of American defense and military might. Construction on the Pentagon began in 1941 during World War II to provide a temporary solution to the War Department's critical shortage of space. The pentagonal design came about because the original site selected was bordered by 5 roads. The shape stuck, but President Roosevelt moved the site down the Potomac River so it wouldn't interfere with the view of Washington from Arlington National Cemetery. Now, nearly 30,000 people work in the Pentagon, which is large enough to accommodate 5 U.S. Capitol buildings. As President Bush emphatically stated during tonight's address to the nation, America will not fold. Here in the nation's capital, spirits and resolve are strong, and city leaders plan to be back to work in the morning. You need to know what changes could affect your commute and your work day. ABC 7 News reporter Suzanne Kennedy is live in front of D.C. Police Headquarters in Northwest Washington with the latest on road closings and the metro. Suzanne?
Maureen, tonight the mayor extended the state of emergency that he issued earlier today through the next 15 days. He also issued a statement saying that all district offices will be open tomorrow. However, a liberal leave policy will be in effect. A lot of people who work in the district are wondering how this heightened sense of security will affect their day tomorrow. Here's what you need to know. On a night when the National Guard is patrolling Georgetown, it may be hard to believe that Washington will return to normal anytime soon. But despite closed streets tonight, the mayor is vowing to have the district open for business on Wednesday. Metro will open at 5:30 a.m. However, the stops at Reagan National Airport and at the Pentagon will be closed, including the bus bays at the Pentagon.
So if you usually catch the bus at Pentagon Station or you take the bus from Pentagon, those buses will be operating from Pentagon City.
As far as bridges, all will be open, as will most major roads. But there are exceptions. Surrounding the White House, Constitution Avenue and I Street between 14th and 18th Streets will be closed, as will Pennsylvania Avenue between 12th and 14th Streets. Late tonight, D.C.'s deputy mayor and the chief of police stood together in an attempt to reassure district residents of their safety.
All we can do is just do the best we can to maintain a level of safety and security, but right now, quite frankly, I don't think anybody has a full handle on what's taking place, but there will never be another day like today. Nothing from this point on will ever be the same.
D.C. public schools will be closed tomorrow. However, all essential personnel are being asked to report to work. All D.C. government offices, as I mentioned, will be open. However, the Department of Motor Vehicles will be closed. A final note, we told you a little bit about the road closures that will be seen throughout the district tomorrow. Chief Ramsey is urging all of us to exhibit some patience tomorrow. There may be additional road closures. There may be checkpoints added. But he reminds us that all of these measures are being taken for our safety. Reporting live from Metropolitan Police Headquarters, Suzanne Kennedy, ABC 7 News. Back to you.
Thanks so much, Suzanne. Also, along with D.C. public schools, many other school systems in our area will be closed tomorrow. Here's the list for you. In Maryland, Anne Arundel, Prince George's, and Montgomery County, the schools will be closed. In Virginia, Alexandria City Schools, Arlington County, Fairfax County, Falls Church City Schools, Fauquier County, Loudoun County, Manassas Park, and Prince William County schools will all be closed tomorrow. We will squeeze back with the latest school closing information during our newscast. Across the nation tonight, of course, there's a need to know who is responsible for the worst terrorist attack in the history of the United States. And the work has just begun. The FBI is leading the investigation, assisted by several other federal agencies. ABC 7 News reporter Andrea McCarran is here with more on the status of the investigation. Andrea?
Maureen, sources tell ABC 7 News tonight that federal investigators are piecing together evidence against Islamic extremist Osama bin Laden. U.S. intelligence intercepted communications between bin Laden supporters during which they discussed the attacks on the Pentagon and the World Trade Center. Tonight, the hub of the investigation is here in Washington at the FBI's Strategic Information Operations Center. I don't have mixed minus. Can I pull this out and just go? And shook our nation's confidence. Career investigators described the attack as exquisitely well planned.
We need to rally today as we did at Pearl Harbor. Our country can overcome this.
Former Reagan National Security Advisor Robert McFarland.
It has been Herculean that the FBI has done as well as they have in defeating hundreds of these attacks, but we just can't deal with all of them. We've got to go to the source.
The source may be Osama bin Laden. Tonight, thousands of federal agents are sifting through crime scenes from Boston to Washington, searching through flight manifests to see if any passengers, crews, or service personnel had links to bin Laden. Sources say 3 weeks ago he made a specific threat to attack American interests in an unprecedented way. Sources also say bin Laden is the only person with the infrastructure and resources to carry out such a horrific attack. If U.S. intelligence determines that bin Laden is the culprit, federal law does not prohibit our government from hunting him down and killing him.
We are prohibited from assassinating people, but where a person poses a future threat to this country, that person can be murdered.
A bin Laden associate was scheduled to be sentenced tomorrow for his role in the 1998 bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Tanzania. It was set to take place in a federal courthouse in New York City, near the World Trade Center. Remarkably, some of the passengers and crew members aboard the hijacked planes used their cell phones to call their loved ones. They described a horrific scene, including knife attacks against flight attendants. Terrorism experts say an assault of this magnitude likely took at least 6 months to plan. Maureen and Kathleen, back to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea.
Well, we have some new developments tonight out of New York City, where during a recent press conference, Mayor Rudy Giuliani told reporters that at this point they're working under the assumption that there are still people alive in the rubble of the World Trade Center.
Of course, the pictures that we saw today cannot describe the feelings of the people in New York and in the region around New York City. ABC 7 News reporter Brad Bell is live in Hoboken, New Jersey. And Brad, we understand that you are in New Jersey because it's impossible to get into Manhattan tonight.
Well, that's absolutely right. The city is sealed off. The bridges, the tunnels, they're all shut down. But here in Hoboken, directly across the Hudson River in Frank Sinatra Park, you get a good look at the skyline, or what's left of New York's skyline. It is absolutely frightening to see it in person. The smoke cloud is still billowing up. It's dark where the World Trade Centers used to be. It's certainly something that no one ever thought they would see. And occasionally you see the flashing red lights across the way, the ambulances going up the West Side Freeway. But it's in the personal stories that you hear that you get a feeling for the millions of people who have been affected by this tragedy. The personal stories, my own brother, I called him on the phone. He decided to get out of Manhattan where he lives on a bicycle because the roads were too tied up. A young man here in the park on the phone telling his family that he's okay. Another man came up warning that the attacks aren't over, and he wasn't just talking. His fear is real. But mostly the people who come down here are quiet. They look out across the water at a sight they never thought they would see. They say that the skyline they knew is gone. In Washington, it would be as though we'd lost the Washington Monument or perhaps the Capitol building. They are frightened. They don't know what is going to happen next. But I should also say that we see signs of life, the resilience of the community, because just up the hill in Hoboken, there is a lively cityscape. People are going about their lives, going back and forth to the bars and the restaurants, knowing full well that tomorrow their lives will be very different than they were before. Reporting live from Hoboken, New Jersey, I'm Brad Bell, ABC 7 News.
Brad, thank you so much.
Well, there's already speculation about who was responsible for this really devastating act of terrorism.
Tonight we are joined by Professor Yonah Alexander of the Potomac Institute. He has published more than 60 books on the subject of terrorism, including this recent one, which is a profile of Osama bin Laden. Professor Alexander, do you think that bin Laden was responsible for what happened today?
Well, we don't have definitive information about that, but out of the hundreds of terrorist groups around the world, the list is very short, and bin Laden's Al-Qaeda group is on the top of the list.
This seems to have been something that had to be a long time in the planning, so elaborate to have two planes take off within minutes of each other from Boston and to be able to get both those planes to crash into the trade buildings. How many people are capable, how many groups are capable of planning something like this?
Very few. And bin Laden group, as you know, was involved in the first attack on the World Trade Center in 1993. So we're talking about maybe 8 years of planning, because they were not very successful in the first attempt. And we know from other operations, such as the attack on the U.S. embassies in East Africa, that it took them a very long time because it was planned very, very well. They're very sophisticated. They have the motivation, they have the funding, they have the logistical support.
What do you think U.S. response, official response, should be to these attacks?
Well, first of all, I think the responsibility of the government, obviously, is to take care of the victims and to repair the damage, the physical damage and now the psychological damage, as the President has said, to restore the confidence.
How do we do that?
Well, he spoke tonight, and he tried to communicate the message that we shouldn't panic, we should have the confidence and the capability of the government to protect them.
But we've been trying to get bin Laden for a long time, and we've not been able to do it, as you say, since the first World Trade Building attack.
Well, it's not so simple. It takes a great deal of intelligence, particularly human intelligence, and it also takes international cooperation. Unfortunately, there are some nations that do not fully cooperate with the United States, and that's really the problem.
Now, what about the average American after seeing this? People are frightened, people are anxious. Should we be? Will our lives really change after this?
Well, it's certainly not the same as before, but I think it would be a great mistake if the American people are going to panic. We shouldn't surrender to these terrorists. We should continue with our lives and should restore confidence in the government that will protect us.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexander.
Welcome.
And of course, Nightline will provide continuing coverage of this developing story with expert analysis right after ABC 7 News at 11:35.
Here in Washington, of course, security continues to be tight, and that is true in every government office. At Andrews Air Force Base today, security personnel were on the grounds carrying automatic weapons and blocking off the main entrance. Also, an additional Jersey wall went up at Andrews this afternoon as an extra precaution. Also, as a precaution, the Secret Service blocked off part of Van Ness Street in northwest Washington near the University of the District of Columbia. It's in that area that several embassies are located, including the Israeli and Kuwaiti embassies, among many others.
Well, Congress will convene tomorrow to denounce today's terrorist attacks. Congressional leaders and lawmakers from both parties met on the steps of the Capitol this evening to promise that the attacks against our country will not go unpunished.
Senators and House members, Democrats and Republicans will stand shoulder to shoulder to fight this evil that's been perpetrated on this nation. We will stand together to make sure that those who have brought forth this evil deed will pay the price.
Members of Congress also sang God Bless America and offered a silent prayer for victims and their families. Now, here's a breakdown on the 4 planes that were involved in today's attacks. First of all, American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757, en route from Dulles Airport to Los Angeles that crashed into the Pentagon. That plane was carrying 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. And then American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767, en route from Boston to Los Angeles that crashed into the World Trade Center. That plane was carrying 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, and 2 pilots. United Airlines Flight 93 was a Boeing 757. It crashed southeast of Pittsburgh while en route from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. And that plane was carrying 38 passengers, 2 pilots, and 5 flight attendants. And finally, United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767. That flight bound from Boston to Los Angeles, and it too crashed into the World Trade Center. That building was carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots, and 7 flight attendants. Well, family members of the victims of the Dulles flight are gathering at an airport hotel tonight.
And ABC 7 News reporter Susan Roberts is there. She joins us now live with that part of the story. Susan?
Well, hi, Maureen, Kathleen. These families are actually dealing with 2 tragedies, their own personal loss and, of course, this horrific terrorist attack. Now, the Marriott Hotel here has been a makeshift command center for these families throughout the day. The families of the 58 passengers that were on that American Airlines flight number 77 that left Dulles this morning bound for L.A. but crashed at the Pentagon. On the Dulles Access Road this evening, the airport police were stopping all incoming traffic in an effort to tighten security in and around the airport. Earlier today, FBI agents swept the airport, asking the few employees left what they might have seen. They were checking ticket counters, trash cans, anything and everything that might shed some light onto how this attack actually happened. Meanwhile, tonight at the hotel, grief counselors, including local priests, were doing what they could to offer support.
You know, there's a good deal of grief and crying. It's so early in the process that there is literally disbelief and a complete state of shock. That's the only way to describe it.
Of the 58 passengers, we are told approximately 20 of the victims had family members in this area, in the Virginia area, and that they had been notified. Incidentally, the Marriott staff is dealing with their own loss tonight. The Marriott, one of the Marriott New York hotels, was located right next to the World Trade Center, and they don't know how many fellow colleagues they've lost in the blast. We're live near the Dulles Airport. Susan Roberts, ABC 7.
Thank you so much, Susan. Well, of course, American Airlines and United Airlines have also set up emergency hotline numbers for people to call to inquire about family members who may have been on the hijacked jetliners today. And here are those numbers. For American Airlines, you can call 1-800-245-0999. The hotline number for United Airlines is 1-800-932-8555. Kathleen?
Well, the streets of Washington have become much quieter than normal tonight as people reflect on today's tragic events. Connecticut Avenue, for example, in Northwest Washington is normally very busy at this time of night. It was really empty tonight, and most stores had fewer customers, they said, than normal. Tonight, there is an eerie quiet all across the nation's capital, but as ABC 7 News reporter Kathy Fowler shows us, at the heart of this attack, it was chaos for a generation that has never seen this kind of violence on our own soil.
Pentagon, we were up there on the roof up there, and a guy yelled down that they bombed New York City. And I was just watching the White House just to see anything, if it could happen, what's going to happen. And next thing you know, from out of nowhere, you just saw a plane real low and just went straight, didn't come in from high, came in real low, and just the back end of the Pentagon just blew it up. Big mushroom fire cloud. Insane.
Panic filled the streets of downtown D.C. today as Washingtonians tried to get a grip on what was happening in their backyard and in their country. What did it sound like?
It was just a rumble. Once it hit, it was a rumble, and like all these people down below, I'm sitting there up top, I'm like, the Pentagon blew up, and people were walking around like a normal day.
Thousands of people walking the streets of downtown D.C., dazed and shocked after an apparent terrorist attack against the United States.
American Airlines says they have lost 2 aircraft.
The Capitol, White House, and all federal buildings shut down and guarded. On the streets, complete gridlock. Everyone trying to get out of the city, no one able to get anywhere fast enough.
We've been sitting here, what, 2 hours?
Yeah, 10-15.
About an hour and a half.
Planes overhead normally unnoticed. Today, everyone looked up to see if anything else was coming down. But the most shocking sight by far in all of downtown D.C., sharpshooters on top of the White House, prepared for anything. Are you scared?
Oh yeah, look at that. So just from watching that plane going, like, that's thousands of people that probably just died innocently. It's just not right.
Kathy Fowler, ABC 7 News.
Thank you, Kathy. And of course, you know, all of this happened on what was otherwise a gorgeous day here in Washington.
Terrible, terrible contrast between the beautiful weather that we had today and all this week and this very, very ugly tragedy. We do want to bring you up to date on the weather, and here's Doug Hill with that.
All right, Maureen, Kathleen, looks like the clear weather pattern we saw outside today is going to continue just a little while longer. Let's get right to it. In the morning when you wake up, we expect clear skies to be the continuing weather story. Temperatures averaging about 61 degrees, some 50s expected in the suburbs. Now, as far as what's happening weather-wise, you'll see on the satellite animation not much. There is a tropical depression that's trying to form up in the Gulf of Mexico. We'll keep an eye on that. Hurricane Erin is on the right-hand side of the screen, moving out to sea. But most everything is being controlled by a high-pressure center that's moving in overhead, and as a result, we expect a very dry, sunny day tomorrow. There is a possibility we can see a few showers here sometime on Friday morning with the next cold front. Our express forecast, sunshine tomorrow, highs near 80 degrees, and the next 7 days show a chance of showers on Friday, and then very cool, very dry, and very clear weather over the weekend. That's it. Maureen and Kathleen, back to you.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, of course, today was a long day, and President Bush traveled a long road. He was at a speaking engagement in Florida at the start of the day. He ended up in Washington, D.C. after several security stops along the way. It gave the president time to prepare for what may be the most difficult speech he's ever had to make. Tonight, we bring it to you in its entirety.
Good evening. Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts. The victims were in airplanes or in their offices, secretaries, businessmen and women, military and federal workers, moms and dads, friends and neighbors. Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror. The pictures of airplanes flying into buildings, fires burning, huge structures collapsing, have filled us with disbelief, terrible sadness, and a quiet, unyielding anger. These acts of mass murder were intended to frighten our nation into chaos and retreat. But they have failed. Our country is strong. A great people has been moved to defend a great nation. Terrorist attacks can shake the foundations of our biggest buildings, but they cannot touch the foundation of America. These acts shatter steel, but they cannot dent the steel of American resolve. America was targeted for attack because we're the brightest beacon for freedom and opportunity in the world, and no one will keep that light from shining. Today, our nation saw evil, the very worst of human nature, and we responded with the best of America. with the daring of our rescue workers, with the caring for strangers and neighbors who came to give blood and help in any way they could. Immediately following the first attack, I implemented our government's emergency response plans. Our military is powerful, and it's prepared. Our emergency teams are working in New York City and Washington, D.C. to help with local rescue efforts. Our first priority is to get help to those who have been injured and to take every precaution to protect our citizens at home and around the world from further attacks. The functions of our government continue without interruption. Federal agencies in Washington which had to be evacuated today are reopening for essential personnel tonight and will be open for business tomorrow. Our financial institutions remain strong, and the American economy will be open for business as well. The search is underway for those who are behind these evil acts. I've directed the full resources of our intelligence and law enforcement communities to find those responsible and to bring them to justice. We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them. I appreciate so very much the members of Congress who have joined me in strongly condemning these attacks. And on behalf of the American people, I thank the many world leaders who have called to offer their condolences and assistance. America and our friends and allies join with all those who want peace and security in the world, and we stand together to win the war against terrorism. Tonight I ask for your prayers for all those who grieve, for the children whose worlds have been shattered, for all whose sense of safety and security has been threatened. And I pray they will be comforted by a power greater than any of us, spoken through the ages in Psalm 23. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. This is a day when all Americans from every walk of life unite in our resolve for justice and peace. America has stood down enemies before, and we will do so this time. None of us will ever forget this day, yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world. Thank you. Good night, and God bless America.
Good morning. Washington will have the latest developments beginning at 5 o'clock in the morning on this story.
Well, as we leave you tonight, we want to show you a touching moment this evening as the leaders of the nation gathered on the steps of the U.S. Capitol in a show of solidarity. Nightline is next. To the prairies, to the ocean, wide with home, God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home.
This is an ABC News special report.
As we said before, the entire day has been a special report on ABC News, and if you've managed to get your hands on a newspaper in various parts of the country today, you know that your local newspaper has devoted a huge amount of attention to this, and not only in the cities where this occurred, but in Pennsylvania where one of the aircraft went down, and in every city and community across the country, how the country was itself involved. We are, those of us who are working in newsrooms and conveying information, are isolated in the same way that you are, and we do our best in the course of this day to get you close to what has happened and help all of us get closer to understanding why this has happened and what the United States intends to do about it. First, in simple terms of responding before the world to the action which is taken against the country today, and what the United States might do if and or when it is able to discover those people who are responsible for this, those individuals, whether members of an organization, and perhaps that state or states, which if you listen to Larry Eagleburger, former senior official at the State Department and in the White House for many years, believe should require, and a lot of people in the country will sympathize with this notion, an attack on any government that may have been party to these attacks on the United States today. But I think probably the best thing we can do at the moment in describing this day of warfare, 21st century style, as one historian referred to it today, is to go to Diane Sawyer, who has managed to compile much of what we have seen in New York today. Then we'll go to Washington, and then we'll try to pull it all together for you in the next few minutes and proceed with our coverage from there. So here's Diane.
Look at this moment once again. A colossus, wounded, and next to it, another giant with no shield. We cannot see inside, but thousands of people are fighting fire and fumes and fear, making their way down endless staircases, trying to escape before this.
A huge explosion now, raining debris on all of us. We better get out of the way!
No one knows what's next. People are running for their lives.
And all of a sudden, it was this big explosion. I don't know if it's just like what you just seen. That's what we went through before we came out of the building. Then when we get out the building, then another smoke cloud came. We had to go through that smoke cloud again. Mom, I just want you to know I'm all right. And then we saw the people jumping. We saw what we thought was debris, and we realized it was people jumping. I can't do anymore.
Sorry.
The second tower collapses.
Oh my God, there it goes!
And tonight, where New York's tallest buildings proclaimed America's secular might, a ruin, countless souls crushed beneath. Some of them, we're told, were on the phone, saying farewell to their families as the building burned. Some of them, the firefighters, the police, there not by order, but by spirit.
It's the most tragic thing that has happened to America by far. I've been on the fire department 20 years and never lived through this. I lived through 2 collapses today. I'm on vacation from the fire department. I came in on my own. My car's all wrecked, and I just came in to help people and do my job.
And those who perished in the planes also phoning to warn the world that they were now riding in weapons of war.
We've been attacked. It's like World War II. It's World War II. It's unbelievable.
Was there no defense for the Pentagon? And what happened aboard the flight that crashed outside Pittsburgh? We've heard a story that the pilot refused to hurl his plane on Washington and crashed in a field instead. Hospitals filled with wounded, strangers volunteering to give blood. In the ashes, rededication by a nation whose symbol is the eagle, because it is the bird least afraid of a storm, the bird strong enough to soar through and above it.
As we said, we want to try to get you close to this, and one of the difficulties at the Pentagon has been that ABC's John McWethy, who has an office for ABC News in the Pentagon, was on the other side of the Pentagon complex from where this attack took place this morning. You know, there were 4 aircraft involved. One of them crashed in rural Pennsylvania, but an American Airlines plane, American Flight 11, on which 81 passengers and 11 crew died. This was a flight hijacked by the terrorists as it was originally scheduled to go from Boston to Los Angeles. Then the United Airlines flight 767 with 56 passengers and a crew of 9 on board, which took off from Boston on its way to Los Angeles, was crashed into the other World Trade Center. And then at 9:38, another American 757 crashed into the Pentagon, where 58 passengers and 6 crew on that aircraft died. And one of the important things in terms of looking at the explosions throughout the day we've been made aware of by people paying close attention is that whatever the terrorists used on the particular aircraft to subdue the crew, get into the cockpit, and it is widely believed by people who've analyzed this, but that's all it is at the moment, themselves went to the controls. It's been a conventional piece of wisdom from the very beginning that no American airline captain could or would accept the notion of flying his own aircraft into one of these targets. And while we have no idea at this point, and may never have any idea what happened in the cockpits of those particular aircraft, there has been some suggestion today that there are terrorists out there throughout the world and terrorist organizations who are able to enlist people who have some flying capacity, some flying ability. And John Nance, who is our aviation analyst, and others have pointed out that there were pilots who flew in the Afghan Air Force or who flew with the Afghans during the struggle between Afghanistan and the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of talent out there in terms of international terrorism in general. But now, as we make our way through the day, we go back to the Pentagon. John McWethy, like everybody else, was obliged to evacuate from the Pentagon. He's on the side of the Pentagon which was attacked and has had a difficult day, but a tough day, John, trying to report this story from this location. So just review for us, would you?
Peter, I was sitting at my desk in the Pentagon when there was a jolt, and it was clear that the Pentagon had been hit just as the two towers of the World Trade Center had been hit. Horrible clouds of black smoke were billowing out of the Defense Department. A sense of disbelief as people were being forced to evacuate the building. In the part where the greatest damage was, there were many terribly injured people who were being helped by their colleagues out to the pavement outside. Hundreds and hundreds of rescue workers were on the scene within hours. Ambulances were lined up. Bodies were also lined up. There was a tremendous sense of the medical people trying to come to aid of those who were injured. But it took more than 5 hours for rescue workers to really get inside the damaged part of the Pentagon. And tonight, Peter, they are continuing the work. They have heavy equipment. They are working under lights. There are special dogs that are trained to look for dead bodies and to look for survivors both, who are working in the rubble tonight to see if they can pull anyone out of the rubble. We know tonight, Peter, that various jurisdictions, New York, for example, has called up more than 2,000 National Guard. By morning, there will be an additional 1,000. This is to help with control of intersections in the streets. In Virginia, more than 300 have been called up, and about the same number in the District of Columbia. For a while, the intersections in the District of Columbia in northern Virginia and in much of New York appeared to be a very tightly controlled area by the military, by the police. There was very little movement of traffic in any of these jurisdictions. The government is going to great lengths. The president tonight saying that the government is going to be open for business tomorrow. But of course, much of the country today was utterly paralyzed from one coast to the other. Because of the airline cancellations, because of the cell phone tie-ups, and because of so much else that has happened during the course of this day, Peter.
And John, just before we leave you for just a little while, would you review for us what your sources believe the casualty estimates are at this moment?
There is no estimate for what has happened in New York that I know of, although they fear the casualties there are going to be many, many thousands. We are hearing from one local official here, Peter, that there could be as many as 800 dead in the Pentagon.
Thanks very much, John McWethy at the Pentagon, as close to the Pentagon as he's allowed to get tonight, reporting under very difficult circumstances. Cynthia McFadden is on the west side of New York City in what we keep describing as the trauma center, where triage was originally about meant to occur. Do you have any further sense or any closer sense of the magnitude of this in terms of human loss?
Well, Peter, what I can tell you is this. We have talked to sources who have been inside the triage center all day and asked them why the volume of extreme trauma, why the number of people just hasn't been seen. You can see this parade of ambulances, I think, behind me here. We've been seeing ambulances come through all day and rescue vehicles. All of them, for the most part, empty, with the exception of some rescue workers and some other rescuers at the scene. But by and large, they have been walking into this center, not the kind of severe trauma. When I just asked why they weren't here, someone simply said, Cynthia, it's because the victims are dead.
Well, thanks, Cynthia McFadden. I said a short while ago that we'd only actually publicly identified one person, one individual who died today, and that was the wife of the Solicitor General of the United States, Barbara Olson. I got her first name right, I think. Barbara Olson, who was on the aircraft that attacked the Pentagon and was able to communicate with her husband, to whom we obviously extend our deepest, just everybody who knows him must be thinking about his tragedy tonight and the potential for tragedy for so many other people. But Mayor Giuliani in New York has now given us some sense of loss in the firefighting contingent in New York City, because as you couldn't help but see in an instance like this, when every civilian in his or her right mind was running away from things, the firefighters and the police, but particularly the firefighters, were running in the direction of disaster. And 3 top city fire department officials died at the scene of the World Trade Center devastation today. One of them, Ray Downey, the Chief of Special Operations Command, ironically was in charge of the New York City contingent that was sent to Oklahoma City at the time of the bombing. And Chief Downey has lost his life. Also killed tonight from the ranks of the firefighters in New York City were the first Deputy Commissioner, William Feehan, and the Chief of the Department, Peter Ganchi. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. Just telling us, as we already knew instinctively, that the most senior officers of the fire of the New York City Department of Firefighting were on their way in to help people not running away at this time. Bill Blakemore is in